Good evening, everyone. Randy Weir here, having a nice, quiet day, hot day here in Colorado. And I'm excited to have my guest on tonight. Hopefully, we don't have any technical difficulties. We both have storms in our area, so we're hoping to go here. But I will bring her up now. I have Traci Hunter Abramson. I've
Hello.
wow. But I see the Hunter on your website, which
Yep.
uh, is that a maiden name or is that middle name?
It is a maiden name.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
when I
one of
first
my
started,
main characters in one of my book series is named Hunter, but not after you because he's a guy. But that's a great last name.
yeah, and it was funny because when I first was trying to decide what name to use as an author, everyone in the East Coast knows me as Traci Abramson. Everyone in the West knew me as Traci Hunter. And so I was like, you know what, let's just make it simple. We'll use both. And my husband was like, you should just use Hunter. And I was like, the problem is it's such a common name, it's hard to find you. Like, on Amazon, people have to know how to spell Abramson, but having Tracy spelled with an I as it is, I'm kind of used to the misspellings. But yeah, I mean it's worked well because I have had people that figured out I was a writer literally because they saw either the Tracy Hunter or the Tracy Abramson. So
Well, all the books I've seen by you has all three names. Do you
yeah,
have any early books that were just one or the other?
no, it's always been that way.
Good. Well, it should be easy to find you then, right? That's
Yep.
good. So, all right. So, tell us a little about yourself, all the important things, what makes you famous and special.
I mean, me pretending to be famous.
Well,
Um,
famous enough.
I mean, my background is I'm former CIA, so that's Central Intelligence Agency, not Culinary Institute, um, and
Both are
I
dangerous, right?
it could be
Yeah.
seriously, but yeah, I started writing. I mean, I actually started writing during at the end of college, and um, when I left the CIA, I started doing a lot of writing, and it took me a long time to learn the craft, but my first book came out in 2004, so I'm now 21 years into this journey, and it went from kind of a hobby into the day job. So,
Well, and I see you have 45 books, so you've been pretty busy in all those years.
yeah,
And more coming, I'm sure.
yeah, I think with the novellas, I'm up to about 53. So, and I'll have another one out. A novella collection comes out next month, and then another one will be October. So this was kind of a busy year. I had 5 releases total. So
Wow.
yeah.
That's keeps you busy. Did you ever leave that room?
Um, yes, because most of the time when I'm writing, I write while I'm walking on the treadmill. So,
Oh, okay. So you got one of those. You got a little stand there with your laptop and
I use an old fashioned. I actually have it right here. So this is an old fashioned Alpha Smart Neo. So this is like they don't even make these
oh
anymore.
wow.
Um, but I put on my treadmill down in the basement, and I also have a walking pad in case sometimes my treadmill gets a little it objects, and so it starts shorting out. So, and
Oh,
this is the backup treadmill because I've already killed one in the last year. So my husband wouldn't buy me a backup to the backup, so he bought me a walking pad instead. So, but I like the treadmill better because there's like nothing, no other work there. Like I go down and I can't do anything else. And in my office, I'm like, oh, I should pay this, and I should, I need to research that or do this front matter, or there's always little tasks. So,
yeah, I wish I could do that. I have a sit to stand, so I'm always standing when I can't
uh-huh.
sit and type anymore because I'll start to nod off, whatever. I guess my work is that boring or something, but I sit to stand now, and that's for me the best way to ride. It just works well for me. I wish I could
Yeah.
do a treadmill. That would be all right. I don't know if my legs could handle it. I'm a little younger than you, but or a little bit older than you. Sorry. Uh,
Well,
so
and
so I saw on your website though you love to travel. Do what's some of the exotic places in the world that you've enjoyed and been to?
so the most recent one was Hong Kong. Went there for the first time this year. Went to Singapore last year. I really liked Istanbul. In fact, my book that comes out in October victim number 8 has the cover shot was actually one I took in the cistern in Istanbul on my way home from Singapore. So that was a fun one. But I mean, most of the time I typically head to Europe. I've done, I'm sorry, yeah, Singapore was the one I was on my way back from. But I've done a couple of, I needed to write something set in Asia. It's a book that's coming out next year. So that's what prompted those trips. And I mean, hit Warsaw this year, some of Austria and Germany, went to the UK. At one point, I was actually had been in London more times, the London Heathrow Airport, than I had been in my home airports. So
Oh, wow.
because in Virginia, I have 4 airports to choose from, and so I would kept going out of different ones. And so I hadn't ever gone out of any of this. I think I'd gone out of Dulles twice. So it was kind of
Right, because
crazy.
you got the two in Washington, and
And then I haven't actually done Baltimore this year, but I can fly to Richmond as well. So
so it's a pretty short drive to get to any of those airports for you.
yeah, everything's about an hour.
Whatever's the
So
cheapest, right?
that's pretty much it. I mean, my husband would rather like take flying into Baltimore is not bad. I don't like to fly out of there because it's easier to take the train up there, and taking the train means I might be late. So it's a little bit more of a question of whether or not I'm making it to where I want to be. So coming home, it's like the train's late, whatever. I can just tell my husband to leave the house later. But yes, I do like to travel, and I've traveled a lot. Of course, I go out to the Western U.S. a lot because that's from Arizona. So my publisher's in Utah, so I'm out in those areas a lot.
So you got lots of stamps in your passport, huh? From everywhere you've been. If they still do stamps these days, I
They
don't know if
don't
they
do
do.
them as much. Like Singapore doesn't do them. The UK doesn't really do them much anymore. In fact, it was really funny because I'd been to the UK already, and I was flying. I entered the EU through Warsaw, and the person who was doing this, because going into the EU they need to stamp it because they have a 90-day visa, and or no visa required. And and as I was going in, the lady's like, "Oh," and she was thinking I was a brand new traveler. It was a new passport. And so she's like trying to explain all this. I said, "Ma'am, I'm fine. Like really, just stamp the passport
Yeah,
already."
I've been through this many times.
Like I'm like this is I think at that point it was like my third or fourth. I think it was my third international trip at that point for the year. So it was rather comical.
Do you have to
So
so you have to get a new passport every so many years? I mean, it shows you how much I travel. I don't get out of the
yeah,
U.S. very
it's
much.
every 10 years, but it has to be valid. Most countries, if it's not valid for at least 6 months, then they won't let you in because they want to make sure that if something happened and you need to stay, that you can still have a valid passport to leave. And
Yeah.
so I had to find a window of when would I be able to leave, like not have my passport. And sure enough, as soon, like the day after I sent my passport in for renewal, I got a call saying, "Hey, could you be in Paris next week?" And I was like, "Well, no." And they're like,
I want to get
"But
stuck
but
there.
we," and I was like, I literally have no passport. Like it is in process. I did the rush on it and everything, just worried about that problem. But so anyway, I was like, the friend who needed to meet me ended up meeting me in London instead, and it all worked out. But they were like, "Wait, you never say no." I was like, "Well, there is a reason this time." So
Well, and there was a time there, I think, I don't know, COVID or whatever, it was taking a long time to get a passport, wasn't it?
yeah.
Like almost a year, I think, or something like that.
Yeah, and that's honestly why I ended up with a lot of travel. Like my Asia trip should have been during the COVID years. I have a couple of I have a cruise that I'm working with a travel agent right now. We're doing like a reader cruise.
Hmm.
I already have one already scheduled for next year on going to Cabo, but then we'll do one the following year in the Caribbean, and that was supposed to happen in 2021. So it's like all of these things just kept getting backed up. So my first year when 2022, all of a sudden I'm like going gone all the time. My husband was like, "Where are you? What is the deal?" I said, "Well, the trip to Paris and London, that was supposed to happen in 2021, or 2020. It's like all of these things that should have happened. We had a Germany trip that got canceled. I was supposed to go to Sarajevo, that got canceled. Like everything, everyone had things that this happened to us all, whether it was just going to visit people, or just not getting to go into the office for work and stuff.
So it sounds like you've hit most of the continents, maybe other than
I have
the
not done
Arctic, right?
Africa.
You haven't been to Africa. Okay.
I've not been to Africa. Yeah, I mean, a couple of times I tried, and there was always either something that happened where there was a threat assessment that said no, or the timing just didn't work out right. So
One day, right? One day.
it'll happen.
Yeah.
Just a matter of where.
So you work for the CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency.
Yep.
So how many years did you do that, and what did your work entail that you can tell us about?
Okay, so I was there for just over 6 years, and I was a little bit of a jack of all trades, but I was on the admin side of things, so mostly finance. But I was able. The cool thing that was really helpful for what I do now is during the first Gulf War, I was a liaison officer. I worked in the liaison group. And so my job was to help coordinate different things with other government agencies, specifically in the intelligence community. And so because of that, I had a pretty good handle of, I know what NSA does, I know what DIA does, and DIA is not just a typo for CIA. Like that's
Right.
what everyone always thinks it is, but so it just, understanding how the alphabet soup works. I've worked with the FBI and, a lot of those folks. So that was really useful that I was in that position. And my last assignment there, I was working in logistics and security, and got to, do some work with the bomb ordnance dogs, and, you know, just just a lot of things. I mean, honestly, some of the funnest guys to work with are like the guys in the motor pool. You need a favor. Those guys are awesome. So it's just, it was just really a cool situation. I got to, I didn't get you have people like I.S. Berry that she was an operative, and so she's going to have that very specific knowledge of what operatives do in the field and everything, and having that experience, which is amazing. For me, I don't have that, but I have more of a broad view of what the agency as a whole did. So, so it was pretty fun.
So a wealth of ideas came from working there, and you've
Yes.
translated that into some of your stories. Do you
Yep.
ever have to be careful about some of the stuff you're writing, or
Um,
issues there that you always talk? Some people who are in the field, obviously, they have to
yeah.
they can't write about what they did, obviously, or
So,
get in trouble.
well, so basically, all of my books that have anything to do with government action, government intel, military action, anything like that, I actually send them into the CI has their classification publication review board,
Hmm.
um, or publication classification review board, and so I send everything into them. Before I send it to anybody else, and so they tell me, yes, it's all fine. We don't see anything objectionable or whatever. Um, I mean, every once in a while they'll have a couple of words they want me to take out, or something they want me to rework, but they're really professional and helpful. So like, I mean, I think I've maybe had something like that happen like 3 times, and one of the times they came back and says, "Ah, never mind. We really probably overreacted on that." Of course, they told me that after I'd already deleted everything, so I have no idea what I originally had, but we'd already fixed it and it was fine. So it's like, it's all good. But yeah, I mean, the funny thing is when I first started, every time I put anything in a book that was based on reality, my editors would come back and say, "Yeah, we need to change this." And I was like, I sometimes I couldn't say why it was realistic because that part would have been classified. And so I think it was probably my fifth book. They wanted me to change a scene, and I really liked how the scene had played out. And they were like, um, And I finally said, look, tell me exactly what is your problem? Like, I just don't understand what the problem is. And she's like, well, we just don't think it's realistic. And I said, look, other than the fact that my character was unarmed and I had a gun in my purse when this happened to me, it happened. So what exactly are you having a problem with? And like, well, we just think that the CIA, somebody with the CIA wouldn't have reacted as strongly as this character did. And I said, okay, that's fair. Because at the time, I actually was not in the CIA with my gun in my purse, because it was an incident that happened in Caracas, Venezuela. And I was an exchange student at the time. so, um, so anyway, we toned down some of the reactions, made it where they kind of believed it. But I was like, look, I keep doing this. I keep changing things because you guys say it's not realistic. And I understand we have to make it plausible. But a lot of this stuff really happened. So
Yeah, that's
anyway.
interesting because it seems like everything usually is way overboard.
Mhm.
Definitely, definitely, probably didn't happen that way, but they like that because it seems much more dramatic.
Right.
TV shows and stuff. So it's interesting. They're saying, no, it's too much.
Yeah. And it really was crazy because how many times I was like, oh my gosh, like literally I could tell you step by step exactly what happened here. And like, yeah, that would never happen. It's like, okay, I can't tell you. You guys don't even know. You don't understand what it's like to be on the inside. So anyway.
Well, they should trust you because you were on
I
the inside.
know.
That should be one of those things where, you shouldn't have to explain. It's like, okay, I worked at the CIA, so, and just leave
But
it there, right?
but it does come down to credibility. It's like the reader has to buy into this fictional world that we've created.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of it when I was starting out, I just didn't have as good of a grasp on what a reader would consider plausible. So they had to, I guess they kept me in check enough times that now I think I'm pretty good at it. But it's like, okay, I know this didn't, I mean, and it's funny, I can have people hanging out of helicopters, they'll totally buy it. But these little details they get on me. I'm like, okay.
Well, on TV, they're always hanging off of helicopters and somehow
I know.
pulling themselves up, by one arm. I'm like,
Of course they are.
yeah. So, but that's television, right? So, but I thought it
Exactly.
was funny. I read on your site too about being in the CIA. You said it also gave you the skills to deal with the teenage years of your kids, which I thought was very funny. So, what kind of skills did you learn to deal with your teenage children?
So part of it is, I mean, and unfortunately, some of them have picked this up, but like sometimes you don't want your kids to totally know exactly what you're up to, like, so I'm a terrible liar. I will admit it. The CIA can verify that I am horrible. My polygraph, they laughed at me how bad I am at lying. Um, but part of it, you learn how to tell if people are not being terribly honest with you. And so a lot of times, like one of the things that I'd done with my oldest daughter in particular, if she needed me to be the bad guy, like if I'm like, if you get into a bad situation and you know that you shouldn't do something with friends or whatever, said I want you to ask me the question this way. And
Yeah,
then if she phrased it one way, I knew she really wanted to go. And if she phrased it a different way, she wanted me to say no. And
it would be her out. Then.
and I was the bad guy, and she could be like, I'm so mad at my mom. I'm like, you can be mad at me, you can make a big deal about it, but I'm like, it's a safety thing. And then we also had, like, when she was in college, I'd text my kids every night saying love you, and just I'm like, this is your sign that I'm going to bed. And so I would just text them. And it was so funny. My daughter was driving from Idaho to Utah, and she was going out to school there, and she was going to visit friends. And a text came back, and I immediately called. I'm like, who is this? Or no, I text him like, who is this? And so I'm like, put Diana on now. And so a call comes through, and my daughter is laughing. And I'm like, okay, what is going on? Who texted me? And she's like, Mom, it was just my boyfriend. He didn't know. And what he didn't know was there's a code within her reply
Right.
that I know it's her, that it was just a safety thing.
Right.
So, But her friends could not believe, they absolutely could not believe that I knew the text had not come from her. And so it was just like little things like that of like, no way. She's like, and then she told me like they were going someplace and they really weren't, shouldn't have been doing it. They were going to like miss a day of class or something. And they're like, I can't believe you told your mom. She's like, my mother is going to know anyway. There's no point of hiding this. Like, just confessing, she's not going to get mad. But if I lie to her, I'm dead. So anyway, so it's just like little things like that. But I mean, some of it, like I said, I mean, I coached high school swimming for years, and for that was even better because, I mean, helping train teenagers to be honest is a good thing.
Sure.
And was known to set up surveillance cameras in the hotel, like outside the hotel rooms, when I'd have my kids, like when the swimmers were going on an overnight.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
and the funny thing is, one time my girls' relay was rated very, very well for the state that year, and or one year, and somebody, I used to put tape on the outside of their door so I could see if the tape was busted or had been fiddled with, and the tape had been messed up. And I was like, okay, this is a clean break. That's clearly, it wasn't from somebody on the inside. I could tell. So I pulled the surveillance up and I could see one of the other teams had come and tried to get my kids disqualified. Like, they knew that I was really strict, that I would kick them off, like I'd send them home.
Right.
And so I had to go talk to the other coach, and I said, they may have thought this was a practical joke, but this is not funny. And the kids could not believe that I knew who did it. But I was like, but all of my swimmers were like, yeah, coach protected it. And I'm like, guys, it wasn't just to keep you guys, like, keep you from doing something stupid. It was also to keep you safe. And so those little rumors would trickle down through the years of not only like, hey, don't do anything stupid because she will catch you. And the fact that I caught somebody sneaking out the very first time I was like a coach, and two girls were trying to sneak out, and I was like, yeah, not going to happen. I was announcing to my team one year saying, hey guys, if you don't know my background, let me spell it out for you. I'm former CIA, don't mess with it. And this girl at that point was coaching for one of the opposing teams, and she walked by right at that moment. She goes, she caught me. She goes, and nobody ever caught me. And it was like, and of course the rumors again start like, oh man, be scared of Coach Traci, she's going to catch you. So it's just, I mean, half of it's fear factor. And then of course some of my kids take it as a challenge, like, what can we get away with? So that's the not good part. But it was fun.
So did they know you had cameras?
Oh yeah.
Or was it just they were thinking, no, she's like eyes in the back of her head type of stuff, she sees all and hears all.
Well, I would tell them, and like I'd even show them, like I had alarms that would go, that would be on their doors for certain years and things like that. And the funny thing is, one of the times, one of the guys, I know they did it deliberately, that he left his phone in somebody else's room. It's like, hey, I need to check it out. And he looked literally right at the camera, looking, and you could tell he was trying to figure out if it was really there. And he never saw it. But I put it up in a light fixture, and he just looked straight at, like, looking around. And I was like, so I did a screenshot of him staring right at the guys. I'm better than you think I am. Like, trust me.
Must have been a small camera.
Oh yeah, it was tiny.
Oh, that's funny. It kind of reminds me of the Meet the Parents movies. The Robert De Niro was the former CIA. I think he was former CIA or something, but he kind of did the same thing with the cameras around, trying to catch Ben Stiller screwing up and stuff. So yeah.
Oh yeah.
So you said you started writing out of college? That's when you first started writing?
Yeah, I just started as a hobby my senior year of college. I actually graduated in finance and international business, and I just, at that point, was taking only business classes and a couple of law classes. So I just needed something just to kind of as an escape. And that became my escape. Was, I just started fiddling with what ultimately became my first book. But I couldn't quite, it took me a long time to figure out how to do like the beginning, middle, and an end.
Right.
It's
Sure.
it's one thing to have a concept, and a completely different thing to actually write a complete novel. So
And so were you a big reader before that? Did you like, and were those type of books that you write, were those are the authors you like to read?
I mean, I was a voracious reader, and I would read. I mostly read just some of the sweet romance. I would read a lot of, some of the suspense, mystery, thriller, that type of thing. I was pretty like I would read a lot of nonfiction too.
Hmm.
So I mean, I was pretty wide as far as what I was willing to read. I've never been huge into fantasy, but it's not like I wouldn't read it. So
Well, as many
yeah,
books as you write, you don't have a lot of time to read, I'm sure sometimes. So,
not anymore.
so what was that first work you? What was that first thing that you wrote that says, "I think I finally got it"? Yeah,
So
it took you a while, obviously.
the first one I did, the first completed manuscript I had was um, it turned it turned into what became an unlikely pair, or my Dream's Edge series, which I rewrote during COVID. But it was about it was like an ice skating, pairs ice skating Olympic journey set in the 1980s. And so it was kind of fun. I went back in time because the problem was, especially working for the CIA during the breakup of the Soviet Union, I was using some of that background of like, Soviet defectors, the mom of the main character, and things like that. And I'm like, okay, this now is too dated. By the time I figured out I'm like, even if I write the story really well, it's too recent and it no longer makes sense anymore. Like all the pieces didn't work. And so I just kind of set it on a shelf. And, but basically, it taught me a lot of, okay, how to do the story and how to have a beginning, middle, and an end. And I mean, what ultimately ended up being my first manuscript turned into two novellas and two novels. Like that's how much I was telling the story instead of allowing, really creating the story for the readers to enjoy. So I just needed more skills. And I actually have, I think I wrote like three novels that first one. And I ended up writing three novels total before I wrote what I originally was my original premise. And it was my fourth novel that ultimately ended up getting published. But ironically, it was the first idea that I had for a book. So it's kind of
How long
crazy.
did it take for you to get to find a publisher and stuff? Was it a little bit of a struggle?
So it probably took me like 6 years of writing the book and finally crafting it to where I felt comfortable with it, where I felt like it could go somewhere. And then it was probably another, I mean, I went pretty quickly straight to where I wanted to be. Because I went straight to, I'd made a list. And back then you didn't really do simultaneous submissions. So I went to my first choice, which was called Covenant Communications. Because I could go without an agent and it just looked like a space that would work really well for me. And after months and months and months of waiting, I finally talked to the editor that I had sent it to. And she goes, I enjoyed the story. She goes, but the characters need to be deep. And she goes, think about digging a trench. She goes, I want 10 feet deep. And she goes, you're only 2 feet deep. And so I said, okay. And so she basically, what I didn't know was a revise and resubmit request. And so I spent literally a full year reworking that book and reading things and then saying, okay, what did other people do really well? What could I do to get the same effect, emotional effect as I'm having from this good author? How can I do it in my book and things like that? And finally, I got to the point I was like, you know what? I'm sending it in. If they don't like it, too bad. I'm really excited with what I've done. I'm happy with the story. And I think it was a month to the day of when I had put it in the mail, because this is back when you actually mailed your manuscripts in
Paper.
paper.
Yeah.
And they came back and said, luckily I was sitting down because the managing editor is like, hey, we want to accept your, we want to publish your book. And I was like, wait, what? So it it was a lot of waiting at first, but then I didn't realize, now knowing, looking back, I know what they did is as soon as the resubmit came in, somebody immediately read through it and was like, oh yeah, it's this one's ready now. Let's put it through the committee, and it got approved pretty quickly. So
And was at that point, did that begin to be the first book of a series, or was and they wanted more.
Yeah, so originally back then, this publisher wasn't crazy about doing series, but they wanted to rework my ending because I had kind of left it a little open ended. And I said, well, actually, I've already written half of the next book. Um, so and it was intended to be a trilogy. And so they did allow me to do the trilogy. Um, but they didn't, like the third book, they tried to market it as though it was a standalone, which it could be. But people then were like, wait, I didn't know there was two others. And so then they were going back and reading them. So for my 20th anniversary, they actually went through and redid the covers so that they would look like a series. Because even though back then, everyone was saying that a sequel would only get like, you know, 50 to 80% of the sales of the previous book. And then it would keep dropping for each book. And so I basically went in and proved them wrong because the way I do series, that was a trilogy, but then I was doing spin-offs, like I would do companion novels. So every book could be read in its entirety by itself. There was no plot continuation for most of them. And so I basically made my career doing that, of writing spin-off series.
And at that point, they started to like series better, huh?
Well, I know they like series better, but myself and one other author showed them that it was very lucrative. So they should consider doing this.
Well, it's interesting because I've interviewed quite a few authors, and it's interesting because there are some publishers love series, and there are
Hmm.
some that like standalones. It just seems
Yeah.
to be the culture within their business or whatever, their
Yeah.
philosophy or whatever. So,
Yeah. And like my current publisher, because I'm now shifting over to a different one, and the new one, they're expecting most series to be like 4 books. And I'm like the one I just ended was 14 books. So I typically run more like 8 or 9.
mhm.
Um, so it's going to be an interesting dynamic to see, but I'm their first suspense author. And so we'll see how it goes um, once they see how the sales are and everything. Will they realize, okay, maybe we want to take this one a little longer than 4, or no, that 4 is good and we'll just let them set. So,
Well, and, to me, it's the characters, obviously, and if the
right.
characters still have stories to tell, the
Yep.
series. I mean, there've obviously been very successful series that have gone 20 somehow
Yeah.
novels. So, and maybe they aren't quite as good at they get to that point, but I think the fans still, if the fans want it,
Oh, yeah.
you'll write it, right?
Well, and I mean, like Brad Thor just did his tour, and I was talking to a friend who's like, "Oh yeah, I just drove to see him." I was like, and she drove quite a ways. I'm like,
Yeah,
you know what? It's working for him.
yeah, it is. So do you find? So we want to talk. You sent me a few covers of your book, so let's talk about some of. I think they're more of your recent work. Yeah,
Hmm.
hard for me to throw up 45 covers, so that you got, and you said maybe even over 50 if you counted all your novellas. So what's some of your most recent work? And I can throw some of those up if there are some of the ones that you sent me. I even copied a couple others off of your website too. But
So I have my most recent ones. Royal Intrigue just came out last month, and then Novel Threat came out, and yep, that's the one. So that was just kind of a fun romance, royal suspense.
so it's
Just
a single book, just a standalone.
So it can be read as a standalone. It is part of a series, but again, it's companion novels. So the main male character we've never seen before. The main female character is the younger sister of royal duty the and royal heir, the two female characters in that one. So, um, but yeah, it's not one of those that you have to be like, oh my gosh, I'm missing something. Whatever backstory people need to know, then they'll catch. And then before that was Novel Threat, which that one's probably the most autobiographical book I've ever written
Mm-hmm.
because this one has the main female character is a finance officer in the CIA. Um, I even put my old best friend Mark. I threw him in there. So I even let him keep his name. So I don't know if
Oh,
you read. Well, at least he got his first name in there. We can't use the last name just in
Yeah.
case. I haven't talked to him in years, but um, yeah, but that one was a lot of fun. And then of course I set it in New York so that I just recently been to um, Thriller Fest, and so that was a fun one to kind of set there. But it just the other thing was that the younger sister of the main female character is in the entertainment industry, and so the next book in that series will be Staged Evidence, and it'll be the sister's story. But my sister, she's right now she just has a local television show in Phoenix. In fact, she used to have one. My mom used to have one in Denver as well. But because I grew up in the entertainment industry, it's like it was an easy thing to write. It's like in one case, at one point, they have a really famous actor who's like helping them out with some things, and um, we had some really good friends who were in that category, at least especially locally. So it was fun to write some of those characters that to show insight that maybe everyone doesn't always have the background to write that. I mean, everyone can make it up, but it's fun to have, to use some of that background of what I've already done and things like that. So anyway, so that was a fun one. And then Victim Number 8, I mentioned, will come out in October. But yeah, so I took the photo. The people they put them in there, but the rest of it was my photo off of out of the cistern in Istanbul. And that one, this one's the second of my Luke Steele novels. The first one is Hometown Vendetta, which came out last October. But a lot of fun. It's the first time that I'm using continual characters. So these characters continue forward from one book to the next. I still try to write them as though you can still pick them up without having read the previous ones. Because again, the plot is completely contained within the book, and any backstory you need from the previous one, I just kind of give you a teaser or enough of it that you don't need to know the rest of it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's just, I mean, this one is the main male character is the military aide for the president. And I had a friend who I actually just ran into him in the library, and he had just found out that he had just been named the military aide to the president for the Marine Corps. So I was like one of the first people he told. And it was so funny because he was like, "Yeah, I'll be able to bring you up and give you tours." And I could see the moment where it clicked in, like, I need to not be promising this to people. And I turned to him. I said, "Hey, you know what?" I said, "Let me tell you." I said, "That would be cool. I'm not going to lie, but it's not that I haven't ever been to the White House, and you're my friend first and foremost. Whether or not I ever step foot in the White House because you helped me has nothing to do with that." And just the relief of him, like, "Oh yeah, you really are just my friend." And so at one point it was actually, he was there the last year of Obama and the first year of Trump's first term. And so before the first lady had come in after had taken office, he invited me up to lunch. And so his wife and I went up to lunch, and it was actually quite comical because we were going through security. We went to the gate, and the Secret Service agents are like, "Well, you can't come in here. This is for employees only." And we're like, "Oh, no problem. Like, we just assumed this is the one we would come in. Just let us know which one, where should we go instead?" And it's like, "Okay, well, let us call and we'll find out where you should be." I'm like, "We're early. It's not a problem. It's not an issue at all." And so there's two Secret Service agents there, and one of them goes into the guard shack and is making the phone call. And the other one's still telling us, "Yeah, I'm so sorry. We'd love to help you out, but we're really strict on this." And I could hear the guy in the guard shack say, "Okay, I've got," and he gave my friend's name, and he said, "And Traci," and I could hear through the phone the person on the other end saying Abramson. And like not 20 seconds later, the guy comes out and he says, "Follow me." And he takes us through the entrance that we're not allowed to go through. And I was like, "What in the world is going on?" And so we take him in, and then we go through the next layer of security. And my girlfriend has to go through all of this stuff. And have me bypass a bunch of it. I was like, what is going on? Like, why didn't I have to do everything that she had to do? Like, I understand to go basic security, but I had the low level and she had a higher level. Like, her husband works here. I like, what's going on? And so I was staying with a friend in Vegas who was former Secret Service. I was like, dude, what in the world happened? I said, could they see my background? What in the world would cause them to treat me this way? And he says, oh, yeah. He goes, they pulled your name and immediately saw that you're former CIA, saw your clearance levels. He's like, oh, yeah, she's fine.
No
We're
big
like,
deal.
why are we messing with this? And so, and it was so funny because when they were walking us through at one point when you first walk in by the East reception room. So that's where we'd been waiting for our friend to pick us up and go over to the West Wing. And at one point there's a restroom right there, but it's like a house, it's like just a single restroom.
Right.
And so I live a good hour out of the city, and so as we were getting ready to leave, I I'm going to hit the restroom before we leave. And we were talking to the military aide for the Air Force. And he's like, well, why don't you guys just go upstairs? Because that one has like multiple stalls, so you guys don't have to wait on each other. And I was like, okay. And so I start walking up, and we both have our visitor badges. You have to be escorted. And she's my girlfriend starts walking up behind me. She goes, doesn't somebody have to come with us? And the guy's like, you're with her. Points to me. I said, okay. And so they send us up to the VP's, over by the VP's office, and they're just totally fine with it. And nobody's, it's just comical, how things like that would happen. But I had something similar, like when I was visiting the CIA right after not long after I left, it was within a year. And same thing, I'm in there with the visitor badge, and they haven't changed the codes. I'm coding into the doors and, things like that.
Wow.
And I was like, it's just Traci. It's fine. So.
That's funny. You think they'd be rotating the codes pretty regularly there at the CIA.
They rotate the one I was coding in, they have a reception at. So it's like, but yeah, and in fact, as I was leaving, I said, guys, we're under security. Don't you think you had to fix that? They're like, oh yeah, we probably should. I'm like, just saying. So they just kind of laughed. But
so you mentioned Hometown Vendetta. So you said that came before Victim 8.
Yes. Yep. So that was my first. So that one is fun. That one's more of a domestic terrorism story, and I set it here in Virginia, rural Virginia, and it's actually the very first book, suspense book for Shadow Mountain, which is my current publisher. So they were really excited to see what they would do. It's also my first that I've ever had in hardback. So that was kind of fun. But yeah, so it was I had this idea of, originally the idea was what would happen if an investigator was pulled in on a assignment because of basically a photo of the suspect that shows a class ring, but nothing else, that they ID'd the class ring. And I ended up changing it to a championship ring because in today's world, you don't really have class rings. They're not as common for the high schoolers. But I had it where these two have to go back for his high school reunion. And he's the guy that was, he's the military for the president now, so he's done really well for himself. But he was the kid in school that was kind of the little too thin and always very shy and always got picked on and bullied. And the last thing he wants to do in his world is go back to where, the scene of his nightmares, and he's forced to do exactly that. So it was an interesting premise to do, because somebody in the publishing house had actually gone through, a lot of bullying when he was in high school. And so he gave me some really great insight to deepen that even more than I had done originally. And, but, it's unfortunately one of those things that kids have to deal with, and it does happen. Even happens to adults in the workplace. So I think it was a good topic to address, but it's, again, it's not getting on a soapbox. It's just kind of woven in of, this is just where this guy comes from. So.
And how many books has Luke Steele been in?
So Luke Steele is Victim Number 8 will be the second book for him, and right now it's planned to be a 4-book series, but I have an idea that we could turn it into an 8-book series. So I think we'll go 4 and then see. I'll probably start a new series, and then they'll decide. When I hit book 3, it's like, hey guys, you got to decide. Do you want more, or you want to take a year off and see how that goes? Because I have a lot of series that I'll do that with. I'll have a year or 2 in between because while I'm starting different ones.
Right. You have a flow chart on your website to connect all these different books. You say some of them kind of branch out into different things so people can find them all, figure them all out.
So there's actually a suggested reading order that some of my
Right.
readers help put together.
Okay.
So it shows like which ones are connected to which, the other ones, and things like that, because some of the series do interconnect.
Right.
So it's been a lot of fun. It's always that moment where you have the nugget of, oh my gosh, I've recognized this person from a different book or a different series, and the readers love it. But sometimes, like, I have my longest series was called The Saint Squad, and at one point I was writing a book, and I was like, I really need a special ops team for this. I was like, oh, I can use them. This is perfect. And so I think it was in my Guardian series, I pulled in the Saint Squad, or actually it might have been in Mistaken Reality, which was more of a standalone. But they come in because I know them. I already know who they are. I know their background and such. And honestly, you've written this many books. Naming characters is hard. So if you know somebody you can use that you're already familiar with, it's way easier.
Yeah, I agree. I have characters that go through. I have 3 series too, and I've had characters show across them as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes, it's just fun
Yeah,
just to bring someone in. It makes sense. Like a lawyer or something's going to show up in a crime series, obviously, and all that. So
exactly.
I found this on your website. We didn't talk about this earlier, but I thought this was really interesting. A fiction kitchen trio cookbook, novel
Uh-huh.
recipes from your favorite novels. So you found recipes from other books, the 3 of you.
So so what we did is we actually took a quote from our different books that was referring to, so for example, there might be something like, "Why are you hiding the mint brownies?" And so that quote will be in there, and this little passage from the book, and then we developed a recipe for the mint brownies or whatever, or
Okay,
chocolate mousse pie, and we put that in there. And so it was just different I different things that we just had fun with.
right,
Now the funny thing is that Sarah and Sean, my two co-authors on this one, they both write primarily historical.
right,
And so, and they're both amazing cooks. And so it was comical trying to come up with them coming up with the recipes, because so many things didn't exist. Like, you don't have cream cheese in the
right,
1800s and things like that.
right,
And so a few of the things that they did, they ended up doing more modern versions of, like, a lot of the desserts. I said, okay, you guys can do as many dessert. You tell me what you want to do, and I'll fill in the gaps, because with me writing contemporary, I can go ahead and put, like, if we have something we want to do for an appetizer, I'll just go ahead and put some things in. And so I was writing at the time my book called Covert Ops, and it was planning a wedding. And so I literally was choosing appetizers that I wanted to have in there so that I could use them, put them in the cookbook. And so my editor was like, "You have too much food in this." I said, "Okay, but we have to leave certain things in there because it goes in the other book." And she just kind of shook her head at me and let me get away with some, and pulled me in on a couple of others. But yeah, it was just a lot of fun. I mean, like, and one thing was, like, my son-in-law was teasing me. He's like, "What's baklava?" Because I was referred to baklava, and he's like, he'd never had it. I said, "Oh, well, let me see if I can figure out how to make it." And so I learned how to make baklava because he'd never had it. And so I did that, and ended up being really good. It turned out great. And so I tweaked it a little bit. And so that was one of the recipes that I ended up putting in. And the funny part is when I was in Istanbul, I was like, oh, I should bring home some baklava, right? Because I'm in Turkey, the
right.
best place to buy it. And I bring home like some different types of baklava. And my whole family's like, it's not as good as yours. I was like, seriously, I carried this from Turkey, and you guys are telling me it's not good. So, and it was fine. It just they like mine better. So
Maybe you need to open a baklava shop there in Turkey, right?
apparently
Maybe
so.
there's a big business there for you if it's better than anything they make, huh?
It was funny.
So you're obviously you're traditionally published. You've been with a couple of
Hmm.
different publishers through the year. You mentioned you went with a publisher that didn't require an agent. Do you have an agent now?
I actually just signed with an agent in May. So this is the first time I've had one.
Well, that's
I,
amazing. You've gone that long being
yeah,
traditionally published without an agent. These days, it seems like a lot of companies won't even talk to you unless you got an agent.
yeah, and it was what I was finding is that my new publisher, I kind of came in a back door. They normally work with agent, authors who have agents, and there were a few things that like I negotiated and then it didn't get put into the contract and things like that. And I was missing. I was started finding I was like, okay, I don't have the time to. I was literally spending days going through and trying to compare old contracts to new contracts and things like that. And I was like, this is just going to be too
Right.
much. And then also my original publisher, Covenant, I was expecting to be doing like for the next couple of years. I think I'd still have two books with them for 2026 and 2027. I'll have two books with them and then two books with my new publisher, Shadow Mountain. Um, but then after in 28, I then am just with two books with Shadow Mountain because Covenant is shifting their focus and they're going to um, religion specific content, which I no longer write. And so I was like, I write more than two books a year. So I really do need an agent that can shop kind of my overflow of what I would
Right.
have already
Right.
promised elsewhere. So I'm like, okay, you can, play. You can be the person who deals with the contract and do all of that. And she was great. Like because I have a business background, I was able to go through and say, all right, this is what I want. And they pushed back, and I said, nope, we need to fight for this part. I'm okay with not taking this, and she did, and it worked great. And but I think I have a good handle of what because I've been both my publishers are under the same umbrella corporation, and so I have a good handle of where they're coming from and what's reasonable to ask for and what's not, and things like that. So, um, but yeah, it was nice. I ended up doing. I'd actually done Thriller Fest, and they have what's called Pitch Fest, where you can pitch to agents. And I had pitched originally. It was the book that became Novel Threat, um, and everybody asked for it for at least part of it.
Mhm.
And I was terrible about following up, quite honestly, um, because only 2 weeks later, I found out that my publisher was making some huge changes, and it was the beginning of what is rippling down into me no longer being with going to be publishing with Covenant, and and ultimately me going in with Shadow Mountain. And so I didn't have time to deal with it, and I was able to continue, to do things without an agent at that point. And so then when I finally was realizing, okay, I need to make a change, I had a contract in hand, and one of my friends was like, "You need to. This is what you do. You need a contract in hand, and then you go to an agent and say, I'm already published. I have the contract ready, and you need to only go to people that you're referred to." And so I had three referrals, and one of them was a much newer agent, and didn't only had one sales that I could tell. One of them was a huge agent, and I was a little leery because he had so many clients.
Right.
And then the one that I ended up going with is her name's Kristen Tourette with Martin Literary. And I was like, okay, she seems like the perfect fit because she's a newer agent. She doesn't have a ton of clients, but I really like how she communicates was very much my style and everything. And so it just worked out great. So hopefully we'll make lots of great deals together in the future, and it'll all be good. But yeah, finding an agent, it's hard. It's like getting that needle through in this finding a needle in the haystack. It's not an easy project to undertake.
So when you're writing your books, are you a plotter or you're a pantser or somewhere in between? How you got a lot of books, you got a lot of things you're keeping track of. So how's your writing process?
So my writing process is completely, I am a complete pantser. Like I am a fingers on keyboard and I might have a character name when I start and that's about all I have. Like I don't have a whole lot on the concept when I first start and I just see where it goes. So usually I'll
No?
have some type of a setting, but not always.
Do you write yourself into corners a lot?
I actually don't.
Do pretty good, huh?
Yeah, like I would say, I know a lot of people who are pantsers. People who don't plot at all, they end up losing a lot of words because they do that. They'll go off on tangents, then have to bring it back, and they'll end up having to delete words and things. I'd say I probably lose less than 1,000 words in a manuscript out of a 80,000 word manuscript. So, and sometimes I really don't lose anything. So I think it's just, having read so many books for so long, there's a certain cadence and you're used to like, wait, this is kind of feeling a little dry. I think something needs to happen here. And so
Right.
you just, okay, pull out a gun, pull out a bomb, pull out something. And I do have a bomb problem. I know this. And so it just happens, and I think that's what I don't always know my bad guy. Sometimes it's a good 200 plus words in or pages in before I know who my bad guy is. Sometimes I know the bad guy and I don't know why they're doing what they're doing. I was actually very excited about a little over halfway through my current manuscript. And I think I know why the bad guy's doing what they're doing. I was thrilled that I may have figured this out this early because I'm only about 150 pages in or so. So pretty exciting stuff. So then, of course, I have to make copious notes because I will forget what I decided. And then my characters will take a different path. And I was like, that's not the book I thought I was going to write, but it's okay. It happened.
Yeah.
So,
Well, that's the one thing. Yeah, with the pantser, are your characters kind of sitting there behind you, going, "I
oh, yeah.
want to be this, I want to be that." Yeah.
They completely write the story. Like they
Mhm.
do not give me much choice at all. So,
Yes, I wanted to write. I was going to. Clay was. We were talking about Killing Nashville earlier, and we'll talk about Killing Nashville in a few minutes. But Clay was asking for keynote speakers and stuff, and I'd put in that I wanted to have a little thing about being a pantster and the psychology and the psychosis of being a pantster. But he didn't pick me, so maybe I'll write that one up and throw it on my website someday.
yeah.
So, are you diligent, or do you write every day? I mean, I'm figuring you got all those books. You must be pretty diligent.
So the ideal is I write 6 days a week. I always take Sunday off. As I figure everyone needs that mental break and,
Sure.
so I turn that day off. And then, but ideally I do anywhere between 1,000 and 3,000 words a day. 2,000 is usually the goal. So my current manuscript requires me to do about 2,400 words a day to get it done on time.
Right.
So
Deadlines. Yeah.
deadlines. So yeah, you know how you have like the NaNoWriMo where people are trying to write 50,000
Right.
words within a month. Yeah. So this month is a 60,000 word month. So my
Piece of
editor did, my editor was like, we can give you a couple more weeks. I said, well, let's build it in just in case. But it's mostly because I have to give the CI a month
right.
and the month is going to hit right at Labor Day. And so it's like, if you could give me that extra bit, then that way, if they have a problem, it gives me a little bit more wiggle room. But
So
so
pretty much every one of your books has to go through them, or have you had some stuff you've written that maybe is not
there's
in
a
that realm?
couple. I have a couple that were just like sweet romances that didn't have to go through them, but just about everything does.
Very much so. So
Yeah.
most of your stuff is thrillers or romantic suspense or
Right.
in those veins, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So, are any of your characters based on real people? You kind of mentioned Mark.
Yep.
Any
Mark,
others?
not a whole lot. Like, I mean, it's one of those things you borrow characteristics because even Mark wasn't really so much. I mean,
Right.
I think I might have given him the real Mark's aversion to vegetables, but um, other than that, it's just more of okay. This is the French. I think the friendship was what was more. It was more based on rather than the person. Um, so, so yeah, I don't think I really do that much on real people. I did have one book called Proximity that a little bit was based on. It was based on my sister's stalker that she had in high school and college, and so at the time she was dating the man that she's now married to, and so I gave him kind of the same similar background to her husband, and it was just loosely done, and I never even met her now husband at the time. And they're like, this is our book, this is our book, and I did dedicate it to him because it's just for fun. But it was so funny because I made the character was proverbially always late, like just consistently late. My sister's like, I'm never late, I can't believe you did that. I was like, but the character needed to have that, like it needed to be one of those little quirks. And she's like,
Right.
I can't believe it. I said, it's not based on you, it's just based on your experiences.
Right.
So anyway.
So speaking of characters, and we're at an hour right now, but you said we could go a little longer. You didn't
Uh-huh.
earn any time crunches, and we've kept the power on, so that's good.
We're good.
Um, but I always the name of the show is Bringing Life to Characters. So I always ask this question of every author I interview: what is it you do to get those characters, make them lifelike, get them to jump off the page, where people love them or hate them?
One of my favorite things, honestly, is giving them a sense of humor. Like those dry one-liners. I think those can go so far with so little.
Sure.
Um, and then also, again, giving them a real backstory. So, like my Luke Steele character, having come from being bullied, there's and having a shy disposition. There's always that he's a strong guy, but there's that vulnerability that's there as well. And I think that the number one thing that we need to do as authors is to show that our characters have flaws or they have weaknesses and struggles, and because we all do, and that makes us relatable, makes the characters relatable, is to have things that are challenges or those wounds that we've overcome and that have made us stronger. So
Yeah, and that's true of your bad guys too. I mean, the bad
yeah,
guys can't always be one-dimensional bad guys. They have to have
right.
usually some good traits as well, and even the good guys have their own problems or bad traits.
Yep.
I like that about the humor. I have a private eye in my series with the snarky one-liners. He's always throwing
Hmm.
those out there and stuff, and everybody always asks me that question. I said, well, that's kind of my sense of humor. So but I always likened it to Hawkeye Pierce and MASH,
Uh-huh.
where he would in the worst situations he would be cracking jokes because that's how he dealt with the pressure of the situation.
Right.
And I
Yep.
always thought those were really good. So how have your books and writing changed through the years? You've obviously evolved. You talked about learning the process, but
Hmm. I mean, I don't know. It's interesting because I have a lot of friends who, if they go back and read their early work, it drives them nuts,
mhm,
and mine doesn't.
yeah,
I Yes, I don't. I think I'm definitely much better about writing a deeper point of view now. There's certain, and everyone has like little catchphrases and words that you just keep using. Just is usually the first one that most people have to cull out of their books.
just
Um,
just and that, right? They always say those are overused words. Yeah,
Yeah. And I think now I don't I don't have to do as many drafts anymore because as I'm writing it, I'm fixing it as I'm going. Like I know what a lot of those words are. And it's funny. My editor, we call it, it's kind of her treasure hunt every book, that I will have a new word or two or new phrase, um, because I will get rid of the old ones that she told me to get rid of, and I'll find a new one. And it just always happens. Like, oh, so what is it this time? Get rid of 18 of these or whatever. And so when I first get my manuscript, I think the the editing process, I think I've just gotten really efficient at, having been edited so many times. But I will, my editor, what she does is she gives all of the little line edit type stuff. She just accepts those and just gives me a copy of what she did. But then I print out a copy of all of the comments she made. And so then I'll go through and use that as my checklist to see, all right, as I'm going through, I'm checking it off or saying, all right, this is a bigger issue, I'm going to leave that and come back to it or whatever. But what used to take me 2 weeks to do an edit, I can do it easily in half that now. So it's and it's mostly looking at when somebody says this is a problem, being able to identify, yes, I can see what you're saying, and I'm going to find three different solutions, and which one do I want to use? And it's really the problem solving. I think we get really good at it the more practiced we are.
Well,
So
after all those books, you definitely would definitely get better at. So, is there a book you want to write that you haven't written yet? Maybe something in a different genre, a little spin. You said you had a couple of little more romance type ones, but anything? You had the cookbook, obviously, that's a little out of.
yeah, I mean, there's one that it's actually going to be the first one I give to my agent, but
Mhm.
it's based loosely on my neighborhood. I live on a cul-de-sac, and I years ago I made a comment. Um, I everyone would we kind of raised our kids together, but we would in the evening people would come out and they'd start talking, and everyone brings out their camp chairs, and we end up with this big circle of people hanging out talking and stuff while the kids were out playing hide and seek and everything. And I remember walking up and somebody was like, "Oh, you're coming to join the circle?" And I was like, "My circle of fools," and that name stuck. And so
Title of the book, I'm guessing, huh?
I don't know if that's going to be the title of the book, but I think it might be the series. It
Yeah.
might be the series title, or just in the background, that's who the first one would be dedicated to. But it became the Circle of Fools are the men, and the Queens of the Court are the women. And so I just I don't know if I can really capture the essence of the humor of these guys because it's too
Mhm.
many characters, really. I mean,
Right.
even though we only have 12 houses on my street, it's still a bit much. But I'm going to try. I'm going to see what we can do as far as pulling some of that together. But it was just the concept of bringing some humor into a series a new suspense series that I'd like to give a try to and see what we can pull off.
Gonna have to give all the characters different names, though, huh?
I know. Well, the funny thing is, I started writing and I was like, I just need to give them their real names for now,
For
and
now,
then
and
that
we'll
way I know
change
who
it
they
later.
are. And then because I actually did that, and this is one that I may end up wanting to write as well. Is I had a situation with some swimmers, and I actually wrote it as a novella for a fundraiser, but I'd like to do a full novel version. But it was about I had this young man, and the counselors made a mistake on his summer school because he wasn't going to be eligible for sports the next year, and so he took summer school so he'd be eligible for his senior year, and they messed it up. And so he finds out as we're going into swim tryouts that he's not going to be eligible to swim. And just the year before, he was on my state winning relay team. And so these guys, everyone's just devastated. And me being an outside of the box person, I was like, you know what? The semester changes over at before postseason. The kid can't qualify individually, but we could qualify. If we can get all of our relays qualified, we could take him as a relay swimmer. But that would mean that we would have somebody would have, in essence, earned the spot or would have gone in his place. And but theoretically, you're taking your top swimmers are going to qualify all the same relays and everything. So anyway, I went to the kid and I said, "Look, here's the deal." Or I went to the team and I said, "Look, I don't think he's going to graduate. Like he's not in a good place. Um, what do you say? Are you guys willing to help him? This is my proposal. Would you guys be willing to try to qualify the relays, and then would we give him a spot in that for the regional and state meets?" And one kid said, "I'll give up my spot for him." And wasn't one of the fastest kids, but he was one of the kids who ended up giving up a spot. And it ended up working out. The kid graduated, got pulled into the pre-buds program, ended up having an injury that pulled him out of it. And so I think he ended up becoming a corpsman for the Navy. But anyway, it was just one of those cool stories of these guys that were acting selfless and mature beyond their years, and just seeing this team come together to make room, help this guy succeed was amazing. So anyway, so that's the story I still want to want to do the full version of it.
Right.
But probably turn into a YA though, and I haven't done YA yet, really.
Well, I'm sure someone will publish it. If it's a good story, it'll get there. Otherwise, there's
Yes.
always self-publishing it too, if you want to go down that road. So do you have any advice for aspiring authors?
I think the biggest advice I have is to find somebody you can trust who can give you constructive criticism, like criticism that you can actually utilize, um, and make sure that you don't submit too soon. It's like even with mine, I before I submit after 50 something stories, I still send my books to beta readers and a copy editor, and I try to put our best foot forward because there are so many talented people out there. You want to make sure that your talent is already shining before it hits an agent's desk or a editor's desk.
Yes, beta readers are very helpful. How many beta readers do you usually have?
I'll usually use one or two per book, and then like I said, I do a copy edit as well.
Right.
Um, I have, luckily, my daughter, she's been working for me since college, but she does copy editing and proofreading for both of my publishers. And so I'll have her do one before I send it in to make sure that I'm as good as I can get it, because she's not allowed to work on my books. So I said, she's one of their best, so I might as well take advantage of having her in house. And then every time I do an edit, I'll have her take a look at that and the proof as well. So get those extra eyes on it.
And do you have any marketing tips?
My favorite marketing, in fact, I'm at Killer Nashville, I'm teaching a Thursday workshop, and it's on running street teams, using a launch team. So, using social media, using, bookstagrammers and people like that to help promote your books is amazing, because your reach can go so much beyond what we just would put out on our own. And having people who've read the book who are excited about it, it's way easier to talk about something that you didn't write. Everyone wants to promote their friends and any good book that they've read. So.
And so, yes, events. You've got events coming up. We talked about Killer Nashville. And you're usually on a few panels. You were on a bunch last year, you said.
Yes. Yeah, I was on 7 panels and taught 2 classes last year. So we'll see where I land. But the great thing is, having written as broadly as I have, and for as long as I have, there's not a lot I can't speak on. I'm like, I don't do horror and I don't do gothic. So other than that, and I don't do true crime. So,
right.
But most things
he sent out a list of all the panels, and I'm like,
yeah.
holy cow, there's a lot of panels.
Yeah.
I don't know how many are put on the weekend, but for the week, because they start well, it starts. I guess there is some stuff Thursday, but most of the panels, I think, are Friday,
They're
Saturday,
Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Yeah. And the funny thing was, several of the panels were actually classes that I'd pitched. So it was like, there was one that was like something about Hollywood, like it was like from Hollywood or spy scenes to crime scenes or something like that. I'm like, oh yeah, that was from the title of one of my classes. And anyway, so I kind of laughed. So.
And then you said you're going to go to BoucherCon again this year?
I'll be BoucherCon again this year. And then I'll be on tour for most of the fall.
For books, the new book?
Yeah, for Victim number 8. And then, and then I have a local one here in Virginia, the Central Rappahannock Regional Library. We have a conference there that I think they normally do a virtual one as well that's free, but it's free. So it's a really great one to do. So anyway, but I helped create that conference. It was about 7 or 8, maybe 9 years ago. So I do that one every year, and it'll be fun. And then I'll do actually Left Coast Crime. I've already signed up for February. So
were you at Left Coast Crime this year in Denver?
I have not been to that one before, so I'm excited to
go. Because it was here in Denver. I went to it. It's the first time. I don't think we're going to be able to make San Francisco. We'll see.
Yeah. So I saw
it's in DC the next year, if I remember, which would be right in your neighborhood.
Oh yeah.
In 2027, I believe, is where it's supposed to be. So
yeah.
For now. So you said you're going to be doing a book tour. So your book, you took that picture. Are you going to do any book signings in where you took the picture at as well?
They're not sending me to Istanbul,
No,
sadly. Sadly,
darn.
they're not. But yeah, we'll have to see if we can get that one published in Turkish. That would be pretty cool.
Yeah, that would be good. So, are some of your books in other languages?
They're not yet. So
No.
that's actually one of the things that my agent will be working on is they were sending out a lot of my summer list of ones that I own that I have the rights for. So they're going to see what they can do and maybe see if we can expand that market a little bit.
All right. So we're going to throw up your website here. That's where people can find you,
Yep.
and all your books, I think, are listed there on the site.
They are. If you go into the books tab, it's got them by publication order, by reading order, by series, all the ways.
It's a lot of pages, lots
Yes,
lots of
my
books.
assistant has to keep that up for me. That's the deal.
Have you ever counted up how many words you've written with all those books?
I don't think I want to count that high. We're well into the millions. So I know for 2020 alone, because during COVID, or maybe it was 2021, I remember writing, it was like over 500,000 words for
Wow,
that 1 year. And so my average is usually in the 3 to 400,000 in
that's
recent.
that's impressive.
So 300's more comfortable, 400's not so comfortable. So
Well, everybody needs to go to her website, and it says you've got a newsletter too. Do you put out a monthly newsletter, or is it
I do. And yes, and
more
the
frequent?
sign-up's right there on my website, right on the front page.
And learn where you're going and what's
Yes.
coming out. So. And other social media, you said, I know you got some Facebook pages.
Yeah, so I've got on Facebook it's just Traci Hunter Abramson. And then I'm um and then there's also one called Tracy's Friends, and it's basically just a community of readers, but it's
Mhm.
just a group where people that like to read come together. And then on Instagram and X and all of those, it's just Traci Abramson. So
Yep, good old social media. It's one of those rabbit holes we go down sometimes, and takes up more time than we like sometimes.
definitely. But it's the great thing is we get to see what everyone else is doing and kind of keep up
Right.
with friends and celebrate their successes, so, which is awesome.
And so I think that was all my questions. Was there anything we didn't cover that you wanted to talk about?
I don't think so. It's
I
been
think
fun.
Yes, I enjoyed talking with you. We've never really spent a lot of time. We talked a little bit at BoucherCon and
Yeah.
before, and I'd seen you at Killer Nashville, but never really chatted with you. But hopefully this year I will, because I'll be there as well. And my daughter's coming out with us this year, so we'll
Nice.
see and we'll enjoy. Did you have any books up for awards this year?
I had a couple that made it for the judges for top choices.
The
So
choices? No
yeah,
final.
Hometown Vendetta and Royal Duty were both in that space. So I keep not quite since they went to the five finalists. I'm not finaling. It's very sad. Really, I'm a top 10 kind of girl. So
Well, I won twice.
that's amazing.
But I haven't been in since I won the first 2 years I went. I won both times for the same series, but I haven't had a book. I was a top choice last year. I wasn't one of my books wasn't a top choice this year, but I'm hoping my new book will be. My new character is also named Steele. Last name is Steele, though without
Nice.
the extra E. So I didn't steal from you, honest.
I believe you.
My character was Donnie Steele, and I was going to use the extra E, but there's a well-known hard rock singer that is named Donnie Steele, and I said, no, I don't want to steal from his name. So people think so. Well, thank you, Traci. I appreciate you being on, taking time and talking about all your stuff, and I hope to see you at Killer Nashville.
I will definitely see you there.
Yeah. Take care, and we will see you then.
Thanks, Randy.
Thank you. All right. Thanks, everyone. We went a little long tonight, but that's great. enjoyed talking to Traci. Next week, it'll be on Tuesday, I have Mark Cameron, which Traci and I were talking about Mark. Told me to tell him hi. So, but Mark is a former U.S. Marshal. I've been getting a lot of people in law enforcement and working in that lately. So that's been great. So, but thanks everyone and have a great evening.